Welcome to another episode of the Fan Forum, brought to you by the Go Big Redcast. I'm your host, Honke, and tonight we're joined by Dave Feit, columnist over at Husker Max since 2011. He has a blog called Feit Can Write, and that's where you can find him on Twitter as well, at Feit Can Write. He's an observer of the absurd and a purveyor of snark and sarcasm. Welcome to the Fan Forum, Dave.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, before we get into all the chat, to go over a couple of our upcoming shows and some of the promos, a week from tonight, we have Steve Sipple on Monday, August 15th at 8 p.m. So Redcasters, mark your calendars there. And then this is hot off the presses. On Wednesday night, we're going to be talking about the offense, but we're going to be joined on the offense by Erin Sorensen. So that was kind of cool. We didn't know if we'd be able to get her there, but we were able to get that finalized tonight. So that's very cool. Wednesday night, August 10th at 8 p.m. Speaking of Hail Varsity, go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe. Use Redcast on the promo code and get $10 off your annual subscription. Next up is FSC Edge. If you guys are looking to make a career change, FSC Edge is the place for you. Check out their available jobs today at www.jobs@fsc.com. Alumni Hall, 2 Lincoln locations, downtown, 1120 P Street and South Point Pavilions, right behind Barnes & Noble. Alumni Hall carries the largest and best selection of official licensed Adidas gear for the Huskers. That includes sideline apparel such as coaches' polos, dry fit, shorts, visors, hats, sweatshirts, jackets, and more. Redcasters, are you game ready? And last but not least, Smack and Smooch, custom shirts and specialty items. Shane and Laura out there in Elwood. Find them at Smack and Smooch on Twitter and Facebook, and you can also use the QR code there. So, Dave, what is the Fan Forum here? Well, the Fan Forum, for anyone that's new to it, we ask the same 4 questions to all of our guests. Why are you a Husker fan? What is your favorite Husker fan memory? Who are your all-time favorite Huskers? How do you think the Huskers will do this year? But before we get to that, I just want to just kind of get to know you a little bit here and have you give a little bit of the history. I mentioned you have been a columnist with Husker Max. You have your blog, Feit Can Write. How did you get into doing that? And just tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I have been, we'll get into the Husker fandom in a little bit, but, I've been in Nebraska my whole life. Was born here 48 years ago tomorrow. And
happy birthday. Yeah.
Thank you. Cheap plug there.
Hey, Redcasters, tomorrow, everyone send a happy birthday note to Feit Can Write on Twitter there. So everyone, happy birthday to Dave tomorrow.
Nice. So yeah, went to the University of Nebraska, and after college, I've been following the team my whole life, and kind of at a stretch where I was in between jobs, and I wrote something about one of the first games in the 11 season. I should remember who that was now. And wrote something up, and my wife read it. She's like, "This is really good. You should send this to somebody. You should publish it." I'm like, "Well, who?" She goes, "Well, who's a good website?" I'm like, "Well, I've always liked Husker Max." She goes, "Send it to them." Okay, cool. So I sent it to them, and they were desperate enough that they needed content, apparently. So they ran that, and as they say, the rest is history. Been there 11 years now, and really enjoy that audience and building that community over there, and have kind of grown with it. And it's nice to kind of be able to say whatever I feel about the Huskers, both good and bad, and just kind of lay it out as I see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot's changed in that time since you started there in 2011. I mean, we're just entering into the Big Ten at that point, exiting the Big 12. And geez, we've gone through 3 coaches since then, and countless athletic directors, I guess 4 probably at this point. Yeah. So there's been plenty of change to write about, if nothing else. One of those athletic directors, I have to pull up a tweet of the week, kind of an icebreaker. And Trev Albert's absolutely correct. This is in response to you. That's awesome. You got the attention of Trev. What is that? What was he saying you're correct about there?
The Husker account had posted a video about, I think it was from Fan Day, when they had the little kids doing the interviews of the players. It was a really cute video they posted. And basically Trev said that they had really good fans. And I said, well, the people who make these videos are pretty darn talented too. And that spawned the absolutely correct. And being the very humble person, I grabbed that and made it my header per picture. And we'll probably keep it there until I die.
Yeah, our pin tweet is when we had Osborne on back in May. So the four of us are interviewing Osborne. It's like, yeah, that's not coming down anytime soon. No, you get those, and
not likely to top it.
That's as good as it's going to get, right? Well, let's go to question one. And why are you a Husker fan?
Well, I'm guessing you probably have heard this before, but I don't really recall any specific moment. And I think that's just part of what it means to grow up in Nebraska, especially me, I'm a child of the 80s. That fandom is just something you're born with. And you're born here, you grow up a Husker fan, and it just kind of grows and grows and grows over time. And again, like every other kid of my generation, I have traumatic memories of the 2-point conversion in the 1984 Orange Bowl. I don't specifically remember crying myself to sleep, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's how it went. I do remember we had school the very next day because we started back early, and everybody at school was really upset and everybody was mad, and that was rough. But then after that, probably about the time I turned 8 or 9, my dad would get a pair of tickets to one home game every year. I don't exactly remember when he started, probably 82, 83 would be my guess. But coming down to Lincoln for the day, it was just so much fun. It was like my birthday and Christmas and everything else just all rolled up into one. We'd come down, we'd spend the whole day, we'd walk around downtown, we'd eat lunch and go to the game and stay till the bitter end and everything else. And just seeing that that experience in person, I'm already getting the goosebumps thinking about it. Just if that doesn't instill a fandom in you, especially because back then there were 1 or 2 games a year on TV. There weren't many chances to see them on TV. So being able to go to games and just experience it and seeing everything that you can see in the stadium but not see on TV has really been a big part of me. And then, like I said, since there were so few games on TV, a big part of my fandom was spending Saturdays, had a little old transistor radio. We'd put KFAB on, and I'd go out in the yard and I'd kick a football around to myself, and like every other kid, pretend I'm a Husker and just listen to all those games.
Yeah, that's I very similar, background for me. Growing up in Columbus, you go out on the driveway and shoot hoops during a game because 75% of the games weren't going to be on TV, and listen to Pavelka. And when you do get to go to a home game, how special that was. And I'm sure wherever you're coming from, I think you said you grew up in Gretna. Me growing up in Columbus, you kind of take the same drive. We'd get to Seward. We'd eat at the same place. You're listening to 7 hours of pregame because why wouldn't there be on radio? You need that. And I've heard every soybean ad by the time we hit the interstate. And just really a cool – those are the memories as much as anything, as much as even the game itself. It's kind of everything that surrounds it. Getting to the game was a destination. And, I almost living in Roca now, so just south of Lincoln. I know you said you live in Lincoln. I almost feel I've taken that for granted now that I'm so close to Memorial Stadium. Like there are weekends in the past where it's like, oh, I have a chance to go. But it's easier to sit in the basement and watch it on TV. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man, my 10-year-old self would come back and just slap me across the head. Like it was a big deal that you made that trek. It was an hour and a half. And so this is the first year we've got season tickets now. We haven't done that in years. And so I'm excited. My son, his birthday's tomorrow as well. He's turning 10. And I'm excited to start giving him some of those memories too. We got him into his first ever game a year ago. He's on the autism spectrum. So he has a whole different thing where fireworks and big booms are not his favorite thing. And we took him to Memorial Stadium when he was about 5. In fact, it was the Tanner Lee spring game. Took him there and got there late. And it was it was just a mess on my part. And the place is going nuts, and he lost it. And I did not win any Father of the Year awards that day. I was like, oh, Kathy, can you take him down underneath for a little while? I'll be down at halftime. I came down and he's just sitting there doing this. And I was like, I felt about that small. And we went home after that, and he did not want to even see that stadium for another 2 years. The place I grew up wanting to be at every single day of my life, that kid couldn't have hated more. If he saw Memorial Stadium, he wanted nothing to do with it. So when we were able to start getting him to go back about 2 years ago and just even kind of walk in there, it was a great moment. And then last year I got him to go to Buffalo, and he made it for about a half, which that's better than Buffalo did. So
yeah, that's my son had a similar experience. My son has some hearing issues, and we took him to a spring game probably around the same time, because he'll be 10. He's 10 now. And, the fireworks would go off and he's covering his ears because it's so loud for him with his hearing issues. And he just didn't enjoy it. And, I've taken him to one game. We went to the Bethune-Cookman game and made it through that all right. But I haven't been able to light the passion in him yet. I'm not pushing it because I know I don't want to shove something on him, but I'm just hoping at some point that spark lights and he'll be wanting to go with me.
Well, I think getting some victories maybe is that spark. And you had a couple of great tweets this last week. I wanted to highlight one of them, a trivia one here. Random Husker fact: 33% of Scott Frost wins as Nebraska's coach are against teams from the state of Illinois. And it was 2018 Illinois, 2019 Northern Illinois, 2019 Illinois, and then Northwestern in 2019 and 20 and 21. But I thought the second one was really interesting. And Rob, if there's any answers that come in here, feel free to put them across the front here. This is a trivia question. We're not giving you the answer here, Redcasters. Bonus trivia question. Scott Frost has 5 wins over teams from the state of Illinois. What state's teams is in second place? And can you name the teams? So what state do we have the second most wins over? And this was when you posted that last week, Dave, and we responded right away with the correct answer. I got to give Boomer the credit. It wasn't me that got that. Boomer had that right away. And that's one of those that are in his wheelhouse. He likes those kind of facts. So I thought that was a very good set of tweets there. Dave's Feit can write. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. They're always entertaining tweets and everything coming out. So great follow, Redcasters. Kurt Peterson says New York. Is that correct, Dave?
That is correct.
Who are the two?
And that was a depressing fact to realize. And the two both happened last year, Fordham and Buffalo.
There you go. So Illinois and then New York. I guess we're at least being up on heavily populated states there. I don't know that it's as impressive, but
exactly. So good recruiting basis.
There you go. Well, that's why we went after New Jersey and Rutgers, in the Big Ten, was we wanted to get the New York market with Rutgers. That's what I'm told. So
exactly.
Definitely gotta do that. Well, let's move on to question number 2. What is your favorite Husker fan memory?
Let's see. The one that comes to mind, the first one that comes to mind is 1987. This was the game. I think Nebraska was like 2, and then they played number 3 UCLA. And so, like I said, my dad would get a pair of tickets every year from some guy he knew in town. I don't know how the heck he got these tickets because, it's number 2 versus number 3. It's UCLA. It's a big name. We were in the stadium. I think these seats they're pretty high up in South Stadium, but I didn't care. I also, to be honest, I really couldn't appreciate the fact that it was a number 2 versus number 3 game. I only realized that a couple years ago when I was looking back on it. I'm like, holy crap, I was there for a top 5 matchup, and I probably appreciated about as much as I did when I saw Utah State. But we were there, and so we're pretty high up, and when we would sit that high, my dad would always bring a pair of binoculars, and I would like to use them and just kind of look around and look in the huddle and whatever else. And so it was kind of, I think it was third quarter. I've looked this up at one point. I think it was third quarter, and the huddle broke. And as they were breaking the huddle, Steve Taylor's the quarterback, and he kind of gave Rod Smith just a kind of little pat on the butt, and they kind of broke the huddle. I'm like, oh yeah, they're gonna watch 88. They're gonna go throw to 88. I didn't know a damn thing. I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I was confident that something was going to happen. Not realizing that, I knew that Nebraska is a running team. Rod Smith's a wideout.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's going to happen. So, Taylor fakes a handoff to the fullback, drops back, over the middle to Rod Smith, like a 50-yard, 48-yard touchdown. And I'm just like, well, that was pretty damn cool. I saw that happen. I knew what was going to happen before everybody else did. And that's one of those things that just cemented my fandom. It cemented the fact that, no one on TV saw that. Unless you were watching the huddle through binoculars, you didn't see that. And so that's what cemented to me of, if I have the chance, I'm going to go in person, because you see so much more, you just experience so much more. That was also, that game was Steve Taylor set a record with 5 touchdown passes. So which, I think that record held up probably until Gans, I think, broke it.
Yeah, definitely Callahan era.
That was a really cool experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hold tight for a second. I'm gonna go grab a photo right over here. I have Rod Smith came to my youth midget football banquet when I was like in 8th grade or 6th grade. I'm gonna go get it. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
All right. We'll just talk amongst ourselves right now until he gets back.
I know this makes for a great podcast, but
that's all right.
All right. So this is young Honke talking with Rod Smith at the I think this would have been at Johnny's in Columbus in about 1987 or 88. He's got a toothpick in his mouth and everything. I want to say, if I remember the story right, I think he hit a deer driving back to Lincoln, but everyone was okay at least. You mentioned number 2 versus number 3, a big game, important game. And maybe this is something I think about for all the young Redcasters that, listen to us talk about the old days and everything, but what that stadium is like when it's a big game, when a lot is on the line. That's the thing. We've had a few moments the last few years, a couple here or there, we beat Michigan State in Riley's year, 2015, but we were 3-6. So, even though we beat a top 10 undefeated team, we didn't do our end of it. And, I guess talk a little bit about what was that like? You went to school from 93 to 97. You were there during the 60-3 dynasty, every single season of it. What was that like to be in Memorial Stadium for you when it was so much on the line, a top 5 matchup?
Well, the one thing that was really different then from what it is now is, now the student section is all general admission. So it's first come, first serve. So if you wanted good seats, you got to show up. I don't know what time the kids have to get there now, but we were talking once, if that was there in 95, you'd have to get there at 6 a.m. for a 2:30 kick at least. But back then we had assigned seats. My sophomore year, which would have been 94, me and 3 buddies, we had 4 seats in the first row of the East Stadium, section 10. Just the most amazing seats. If you bought them now, you'd be paying a $2,500 per ticket donation, plus the seat cost, plus everything else. I think we paid $78 for the season.
Yeah.
And just had amazing seats. But it was one of those things where you'd get there and you were there before kickoff, because if you weren't going to be able to fit into your row because everybody showed up. You spent most of the game kind of standing sideways because there was usually a couple extra people in each row, because the students would move down from the higher sections or move, the overhangs in east where it's kind of restricted view. They kind of block, shove in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd stand up on the bleachers, and then the only time you sat was during timeouts. You'd sit down for that minute and a half, and then you're right back up and yell until you lose your voice. And God, it was so much fun. and it was, I won't say every game mattered because I was there for 95. Most of those games were over at halftime. But it was just that confidence of, okay, we're going to score 50 points today. We're going to win. Maybe Matt Turman will throw a ball today. Who knows?
Well,
and it was that excitement, that confidence. It just made it so much fun.
Well, you just mentioned 95, and I love it every time that no disrespect to the teams right now that are playing, and Alabama's had some great teams. I think that LSU team from a couple years ago is one of the greatest of all time. But every year when there is somebody that, goes undefeated, inevitably, oh, well, that's probably the greatest team of all time. And then someone will say, no, 95 Nebraska. Oh, come on, get out of it. That's 25 years ago. That 95 Nebraska team, finished the season playing 4 top 10 teams, Kansas, K-State, Colorado, and Florida. Beat them by an average of something. It was like 28 or 30 points or whatever average win against top 10 teams. It was such a dominating team in the middle of an amazing era. I mean, you were there 93, 94 before, 96, 97 after. Lots of good teams and players before and after, but there was something special about that 95 team. That's my freshman year at college. And Dave from our show, he and I and a friend Travis, we went out to the Colorado game and watched that out in the Rockies. I mean, geez, they scored on the first play of the game to Mon Green. It's just, I've never seen a more dominating team than 95.
Yeah, the one thing that still, if you want a way to get me triggered up, is just mention the 95 team and how, Osborne cheated and used all these bad players. Like the game after Phillips got suspended, Clinton Childs took the very first play of the game 65 yards for a touchdown. And no disrespect to Clinton Childs, I'm not sure he was the second best running back on that team. Because you had Mon Green on that.
And Damon Benning and even Jay Sims, for Christ's sake.
Jay Sims would have started probably for at least 5 of the other Big 8 schools.
And by the way, the team that you're talking about that he did that against wasn't Pacific. It was Arizona State.
Right.
They were up 63-0, I believe it was, at halftime against Arizona State. Something I'm sure the Sun Devils remembered the next year in 96, and they had a really good team returning. But still, that was as dominating of a performance. And to your point, that was right after losing Phillips, the week after it. Phillips didn't play for, basically the rest of the season. He got in some kind of time at the very end of some of the last games. But I mean, he was not even on the team for a good month and a half or whatever. Totally different times. I know that I don't want to relitigate all that stuff, but different times in terms of how it would be handled nationally, how it would be handled too. But I remember Ron Brown talking about it one time where he's like that season was so strange because you had all of that noise, all the off-field stuff that, could break apart a team. And yet he's never seen a team be stronger together. And then it just kind of galvanized them together. Never seen a stronger locker room. And that those guys, the more comments and everything that would be thrown their way, the harder they would play the next week. And that was it. And they just demolished every team they played.
Yeah, and it seemed like the more adversity they faced, the more they just took it personally and just laid it on teams.
Well, there's one other tweet here I want to highlight from last week or a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure when you did it, but this was let's see here. Are the stripes coming back to the Huskers pants this season? Are they striped pants just part of the practice attire? And you gave an update. Probably not. Apparently, NU has been wearing striped pants at practice for a while. I found a practice report video from 2019 that showed them. That's too bad because striped pants are better than plain pants. I 100% agree with this. The reason I brought it up here is because 95 was the first season that we went away from them. So if you watch the 94, technically the 95 Orange Bowl beat Miami, Osborne's first national championship. I think that's the best apparel we've ever worn. It's the perfect color of red. It's the 2 stripes on the side. And by the next year, we had switched to Adidas for the first time. The pants become straight white. There's no stripes on them. And then the red got a little brighter, a little shinier. It was a darker red in 94. But it used to be a mess all across the board. Like we were like Converse, Apex, a couple other, and then all of a sudden when we switched to Adidas, the first time Bill Byrne, kind of got us onto just one apparel company. Then it was like everything became Adidas. I 100% agree with your tweet there on the stripes are better.
I had no idea the 95 team didn't wear striped pants. I'm going to have to look that up because I'm not calling you a liar, but that doesn't, I'm going to have to look that up.
Somewhere here, I wonder, I have to, somewhere I would think I'd have here, the perfect seasons, that one. Got a couple magazines here. This is can't quite see it on that one. No. Again, this is great podcast, but I can't help it.
It really is, and I apologize for this. I'll own this one.
Gosh, just can't, and that's 94. Well, anyways.
That'll be my homework.
That'll be the homework there. Yep. But as I recall it, 94, that was the last one. And I remember being upset at the time. This is why I think I'm right here, is that what I remember is being upset, frustrated after that Orange Bowl where I loved that look. And then by the next year we came out and we were stripeless. But anyways, let's move on. Question number 3. Who are your all-time favorite Huskers?
Oh, man. So, again, the first one that came to mind, again, I'm going to be the stereotypical Nebraska fan who's living in the 1990s, but that was a very formative time for me. So, again, my freshman year is 93, and up until that point, I'd only been to like one game per year. So now I've got season tickets. I can watch every game, stay till the very bitter end. And that 93 team, they don't get talked about a lot, but they were good. They blew a ton of teams out. And so you get to the second half and people are leaving and I could kind of sneak down a little bit, get a little closer. And then one of the things I love about the blowout wins is when those backups get in. Those guys who, the small town kids who never, bust their ass to be fifth string, and their chance for glory is 2 carries in the fourth quarter of the North Texas game. And so I've always had a soft spot for the guys like that. And so the 93 season, we get the blowouts, and I think it's like the 4th or 5th string I-back would come in, and the old stadium announcer would do this ball carried by Makovica. And it was just this beautifully lyric name of Makovica. And I would watch him like, he's for a 5th string, he's a pretty good little back. And so then 94, they moved him over to fullback, and he was back up on that team. And then on 95, he was the starter on the greatest team of all time. So obviously this is Jeff Makovica, the older brother. And then obviously Joel became another one of my favorites. But I've always really liked those 2 guys. Thought they were really good players, tough runners, and that those kind of evolved into this overall enjoyment that I have for walk-on fullbacks from small-town Nebraska schools. There was a point where I could kind of go through the list year by year and say who the walk-on fullback was and what school he was on. I'm kind of falling off on that. But I can tell you the last great Nebraska fullback is a kid from my hometown, Andy Janovich. The last great walk-on Nebraska fullback.
I'm hoping he's not the last ever great walk-on, fullback. I hope that there's a future still for that spot, and I get called out for, living back in the 90s, but I really think that that's an important position and that still can be utilized. And we've got players that can do it here.
And it was so cool when Janovich played because, Gretna was, when I graduated, they were a very, very small Class B school. They dipped down to C1 for a couple years after I graduated. And, there are some guys who came and walked on, but never saw any playing time. So I think Janovich is like the first guy to see any sort of significant playing time, probably since like the 80s. And so now there's a bit of a Gretna pipeline. So, you had Stoltenberg, Frankie, the kickoff specialist is from there. There's been a couple others who have played off and on. So, that moment, I never got to appreciate that as a kid of the people from Columbus or from Grant or name your other small town. You've got that hometown guy who plays a big moment and everybody goes crazy for him. And so I got to see that Wisconsin game where he had that big touchdown was another one of my favorite moments, probably my favorite from any game Nebraska's ever lost.
The crowd was crazy after that. Great run. And no, I think that's an important thing you're saying there with like how the state, we always say the state owns this team more than any other state owns a football program. It really, but it's having that hometown touch to a player. It can just be one. That can be all it takes. Now, for us in Columbus, we happened in the middle of the 90s. That's where Schlesinger was from. I mean, his dad was our garbage man, for years. We had Tim Carpenter was there. Jesse Cush, I played with him. I was a sophomore when he was a senior in high school, and he was our punter for all those years. My senior year, we actually had a scholarship player in my class at Columbus Codas, Brandon Drum, who played. He was a defensive lineman, made it for a few years. But there was a number of guys. Jeff Lake ended up, being a receiver, starting in '97 some games. So there was a number of guys like that back then, and I think that was an important. That's an important element that's been missing, I can say, in Columbus the last 20 years. We haven't had that same connection. Now we have Ernest Hausman, and I think that's awesome. I think it's great to get that pipeline hopefully started up again. We're big on this show on the Redcast on in-state talent, identifying it, going after it. We don't like years like last year where 4 kids from Omaha leave. And so, and I think overall, generally speaking, I've been pleased with this staff on how they've gone about recruiting in state, but it's just making sure that it is a priority. I think one of the things you mentioned the 93 season, and we talked with Damon Benning. It was back in April, and he talked about, we asked him, when did things start to change? Because he got there in 92, and they're good. They're winning 9 games a season, a lot of good players. But what was it? What took you from going 9 wins and all of a sudden becoming the dynasty that you got to see while you were in college? And he said it was when players started to root for other players. That was the big difference. He goes, when you knew it didn't benefit you. So Trumaine Bell, was rooting for Abdul Muhammad, even though Abdul Muhammad was taking snaps away from Trumaine Bell. And it was down the list. He gave plenty of examples, right? Brooke Barringer is rooting for Tommy Frazier, even though Tommy Frazier's taking snaps away from him. When I think of this team right now in a transfer portal year, where the team changes so much. We brought in all these guys, and all you're going to hear about right now is culture. And they're going to say all the right things right now. Right now, the culture is great, and we're getting along great. And I will take them at face value, and I believe them. But the reality will be is if Caleb Tanner can root for O'Shawn Mathis, even if O'Shawn Mathis takes a couple snaps away from him. If O'Shawn Mathis can root for Caleb Tanner when Tanner takes a couple snaps away from him, and it goes down the whole list. When that happens, then I think you can see that's, to me, that's the culture really taking place. And again, I don't see it. I don't have any issue seeing that not happening, but that's important to happen, especially when you have a year like this where you've had so much transition with the portal and everything.
Yeah, that culture, I love and I hate the culture discussion because it matters. It truly matters. I played sparingly in high school, but I know from the teams I played on, the team that was good, we had good players. and B, there was a culture that we were going to win. And you can think about that in other team settings you might be on. Definitely for guys our age, it applies to work settings where you can have good teams at your job and you can have bad teams at your job. And when you're on a bad team at work, it shows up in how people act, how their performance. It can be toxic, and I think the culture, from what I see, is there, because one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is I've been trying to kind of put a cap on the 21 season and just how everything ended up there. And, I go back and forth on the whole close discussion. Were they close? Were they not? And, regardless of where one lands on if they were close or not, the one thing I think saying they were close does is it kind of takes away from what the true legacy of that 21 team is. And the 21 team, to me, they were fighters. They never, ever quit. You can look at so many games in that season. Illinois, Minnesota, Ohio State, several others, Oklahoma, where they got down by 2 touchdowns in the second half. They very easily could have just rolled it up and said, you know what? It's not going to happen today, so we'll try again next week. But they never, ever did that. And they scrapped and they fought, and 9 times they came up short, but dadgummit, they tried and they never quit. And maybe that's just a sentimental old guy thing, but that matters. And
the worst
that carries through.
The worst football I've ever seen Nebraska play was 2017, the last year of Riley, where this is where you kind of get away from record for a second. That team was 4-8. Well, was that a better team than the 3-9 one last year? Hell no. Last year's team fought every game with a really difficult schedule for what it's worth. But I mean, there were flat out times in 2017 where I saw a team that just didn't even look like they wanted to be out there. And last year's team, the effort, I never questioned that. I questioned the mistakes, and there were changes that were made to the coaching staff in areas of the team where I think some of the biggest mistakes were made. But I think to your point, whether it's, we know all the records that happened last year, the 9 single-digit losses, the 8 one-score losses, and I mean, there's some historic records that happened. But were we close? I would say it's this pinch test. We're that close to winning those games, but that doesn't mean that we have to get this much better to win them. We might have to get this much better to make up that difference. And that's the part. So why do we make all these changes? Why do you get rid of 2 of your 3 coordinators? Why do you make all these position coach changes if you only need to get this much better? It's because to get this much better, we have to make that many changes. I mean, that many things were going wrong. Offensive line wise, there's a lot of focus on, we need to get, switch from zone to man blocking and all that. I just think we need to cut mistakes. That was, too many mistakes for too long. And so those are you start to fix those things. And then I think that gap will start to close there. And that's the hope, at least. I mean, that's the optimist hope that, we can flip a lot of wins in a short period of time while the schedule also becomes more manageable.
Yeah. If we're going to talk close, I think, the 93 team to me was close. They were a game away where they were underdogs, but they were a field goal away or some really, really crappy calls away from being national champions. And I think that version of close set the tone for the 94 refuse to lose team. Sure. And, they made some tweaks, they set that goal, and they achieved it. Whereas last year, since November, Nebraska's fired the 4 assistants, they hired 2 new coordinators, they brought in 12 plus transfers, all with the idea that they need to play now. And to me, I don't see that as close. I think it's more of an overhaul. And quite frankly, I think that's good, because if you are 3-9 or 15-29 overall, nobody wants that. So I think if you say that they're a
Hmm.
close program, I think that kind of cheapens the work that Frost and the assistants have done over the offseason to dramatically improve the talent, to maintain that culture, improve the coaching. So that's the idea is, I think in the micro of each Pacific of 9 games, yeah, they were close. They were close 9 times, but big picture, I don't see it as close, and I don't think that's a bad thing considering where we're going to be at in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it gets in a little bit into like the verbiage. And another word I'd use that isn't close is competitive gets used, and it can be used, I think, correctly or incorrectly. One of the writers from Ohio asked that question to Frost last year and goes, what is it going to take to get to Nebraska to be more competitive? And he pounced on it right away, where he's like, well, we're competitive. We're playing with these teams all the way down. That's 100% true. You can also say, are we competitive in the standings when we get to November? And the answer to that is no matter how good or how close or not close or whatever the verbiage you want to use, we have not been competitive. We have not played meaningful games in Memorial Stadium in the month of November in the standings. We haven't since he's gotten here. To go back to what you talked about when you were a kid growing up, watching a team number 2 versus number 3, that's important too. And so it's a lot of things. I asked you before we got on, I was like, are you an optimist? Are you a realist? And because we have to label everyone, right? I mean, it's the way we are in this country now. You're a Democrat, a Republican, or you this. And at the end of the day, it's like, you know what? I literally truly believe I'm a bit of both. And I think a lot of people are. I hear a lot of optimism in your voice as you're talking, even though you kind of said, hey, I've kind of had the realism beat into me. Well, who hasn't as a fan right now? I mean, I am too. But yet there's also that optimistic piece of me that will actually, quite honestly, I hope it's always there. I hope I never lose the optimistic hope, but it's been tested. I'll give it that.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I can't remember going to a game, and I've been going to games pretty much ever since I've been to college. I was trying to look the other day. I think I've missed 4 home games since '93. So I've been to a lot of home games. I've been to, before kids, went to a lot of road games. I haven't been on the road for a while, but I can't remember sitting down before a game thinking, we got no chance today. There's no hope. Even Ohio State in 2017 or 2019 or pick a year, I never thought, there's absolutely no hope. There's games where you're like, man, it all has to go right.
2017 Ohio State was one of those. I was like, that's going to have to.
Yeah, there's games where it's like, okay, everything has to go right.
Yeah.
But there's a chance. And, I definitely will never lose that. There's times where I'm like, okay, that 2017 team, we could replay that season 1,000 times. They're going to end up the same record or worse. They're never going to turn into a 9-win team. And that's just the reality of it. But, I don't, I think if that's, again, realist, optimist, who cares? It's about being real to who you are and, seeing what your eyes tell you.
Yep. Before we get to question 4 here, since this was about who's some of your all-time favorite Huskers, I want to highlight some work you did that I still use every once in a while. And I didn't realize this was you that wrote this. This is from like 2014, I think it was, but you did a greatest Huskers by number. And I want to actually say, I want to thank you for this because it's a service you've done. There are so many times over the years I've Googled it and like, who's the best number 64. And this always came up. And it wasn't until I just kind of stumbled on it again like a week ago. And then I was like, oh, Dave wrote this and I'm going to be talking to Dave in a week. So I had to highlight that. But that was very cool that you did it. How much research and how long did that take you to put all that together?
First of all, thank you. Second of all, best 64 would be Bob Brown.
There you go.
And to answer your question, it was a crap ton. There is no all-time composite roster that exists. Somebody has one. by all means, my DMs are open. Hit me up. I would love to get a copy of that. My original intention with that project was the 50th year of the sellout streak. I think is when I started, was the 50th year of the sellout streak. And so I kind of went back through those 50 prior seasons, I think back to the beginning of the Vanny, and just truly went to Husker Max, highlighted the roster, copy, paste into a spreadsheet, spent a crap ton of time cleaning it up and getting it formatted, but the outcome of it, that was a lot of work, but the outcome of it was a lot of fun, because there were a lot of guys, from the 70s and 60s who, I knew the names, but when I'm trying to think of who's the best person to wear, let's say 72, I knew that 72 is on the wall. I think, who is that now?
Will Shields, or?
So Shields is 75.
Oh, 75.
72 is one of the retired numbers from the 70s.
Oh, as in like Glover or Jacobson?
Yeah, I think it's Jake. I think it's Jacobson. Glover's also 75.
Why can't I? What was Wiegert?
But just being able to, Uyghur's also 72. Yeah, you're right. But again, just being able to go through and learn about so many of these guys, especially with some of the oddball numbers where there is nobody. There's a handful of numbers where there's never been like a first team all conference selection to ever wear that number. Okay, well, I got to pick somebody. Who are we going with? And that's what made that project fun, was not only did I get to pick the quote unquote best, but then I also did kind of somebody that I remembered seeing that I liked. And, again, just being able to talk about experiences and memories I had was super fun. I have toyed with the idea of revamping that project because I only went back to the start of the sellout streak, and I would love to be able to do a full one of all time, going back to whenever they started using numbers on uniforms, which I think is 1925, 27, somewhere in there. And
Redcast,
kind of going with that. That is that's a mountain of work, but I think it would be a lot of fun. And there's a ton of, once you have that data, there's a ton of fun things you can do with it.
Yeah, I can put you in touch with Redcast Boomer, because he is our historian on the show, and he lives in the era of Jumbo Steam and all those players and the coaches back then. But it's great work what you did, and like I said, it's something I have just periodically over time I seem to keep running into, and it's nice to be able to put the face to the person who did it. So kudos there.
Yeah, that's a fun project, and it's been fun the 10 years since to be like, okay, would I swap anybody in from the current eras, or people who, would I make any changes now? And I think for the most part, Adrian Martinez, I forget who I had it to, but Martinez would probably get the call there. I think maybe one or two others I would move in, but and it's a bit of a commentary on how the last decade has gone, that there's not a lot of replacements I would make. Yeah,
it is. I think it's kind of the recency commentary of not being great, but also a lot of times it's the Rod Smiths and the people that we grew up with. They're always going to have a special feeling to us. And I think about that when I talk to my dad, or I talk to someone from that generation that was in the 60s and 70s. We had Mike Babcock on a couple weeks ago, and we did a full history of the Nebraska-Oklahoma series. And you talk to him, and he was a fan in the 60s, and he talks about those players, Wayne Malin and those guys. Right. He talks about them the way that you and I would talk about one of the guys from the mid 90s, and it's interesting now that we're at an age where we can look back on an era and we sound like the old guys to the young ones, but
absolutely.
Let's go to question number 4 here. And this is the fun. We already kind of touched on little bits and pieces of this, but the enjoyable, I love ending with this. How do you think the Huskers will do next year? Or I should say this year now. We're a couple weeks away.
Well, I'm going to preface this with I'm going to break one of my cardinal rules tonight, which I've never done. Since I've been doing the Husker Max thing, I've been asked, by friends, by family, by random people on the internet, how are they going to do this year? I'm like, and I always have given a wishy-washy answer of, well, I think they could be good. I think they could do good things. I think they've got a chance in every game, something to that effect. And, I've never said, well, 9-3 or 7-7 or whatever the number would be, and I'll give a number. I'm guardedly optimistic. 5 years ago when Frost was hired, I had blind faith that it would work. I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I was confident. I was convinced that he would rebuild whatever needed fixing. He'd establish a high-powered offense, and he would get Nebraska back. But these last 4 years have, they've arranged that bad faith. And, I think everything could click and, for the program as a whole. And, I want to be absolutely clear. I want that to happen. I would love for that to happen. I would love to have my son, your son, everybody else be excited about a team. I would love to be able to chastise people for being bandwagon fans. I want to give them something to be a bandwagon about. But I have a prove it mentality now. Is Casey Thompson healthy enough to do things that either one of the Martinezes couldn't? Maybe, but I need to see it. Can they replace those losses on the defensive line? Who's going to take the JoJo Doman role? What's going to happen in the secondary? Do they have the pieces? Maybe. I need to see it. Will Frost really turn over the control of the offense? Can Dom and Raiola transform the line into a liability, from a liability into a strength? Prove it. Can they avoid the stupid mistakes and not bet down special teams? Prove it to me. I've said before, and I will say it again, that this year I will be happy with 6 wins. Could they get more? Absolutely. Could they go 3-9 again? Absolutely. And so that's kind of where I'm at, is get me to a bowl game, and then let's build from there. One of the things that I've said, or I haven't said it out loud yet, but have started something I'm going to write. I'll publish this in a week or so. I'm kind of looking at Frost and the program with both a big picture and small picture view. So the big picture I've always looked at is, for the program, I want to see progress. I want to see them building towards something bigger than what it can be. I'm not naive enough to think that it's going to be 94, 95, 97 again, because there's a lot of things that have changed since that time that probably won't happen again. But it doesn't mean we can't have a program that is a sustained winner, that is always going to be a division favorite, that is going to recruit well, develop better, outwork everybody, and just do the things that we need to do. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a lot of that from Frost, and I've called him out on that several times over the years. I've decided that, for this season, I'm not going to. It's not because I don't care about where the program gets built, because those things absolutely matter. But I think I've realized, maybe it's taking me a little longer than everybody else, that if he can't win this year, the program building stuff doesn't matter, because next year that'll be somebody else's problem. So, I'm willing to let a lot of those big picture state of the program stuff slide. Should he made a statement at Big Ten Media Days? Yeah, probably should have. It's a layup, and he didn't take it. Doesn't matter. Now, if they don't win 7 games,
if they at some point the games matter more than the gamesmanship off the field. That so much Twitter talk and everything ends up being about, right? It's something. It might be something with the name Dave, because we have Redcast Dave too, and he's big on the get to a bowl game 6-6 kind of thing. He also was big on they should have a statement at the Big Ten thing. I really think that first game Northwestern is it's so crucial, and I would say the exact same thing. We said the exact same thing last year with Illinois. The start of the season was so important. Frost has talked about the need to get momentum, which he has some control over as head coach. We didn't get that momentum last year. There's the chance the schedule can work its way out to give some momentum, but it can also it's up to this team has to go out and take that momentum. It has to earn it. It has to win it game after game. And if you go out and you beat Northwestern, then you got to get yourself ready to come back with a long flight and come back and play a North Dakota team. And then you got to go and you got to beat a Georgia Southern team. And you can't look past anyone because, we've lost to Troy. We've lost to Northern Illinois. We've lost to teams so you don't look past anyone. And then can we beat Oklahoma? Absolutely we can. I was in Norman last year to watch us lose by 1 score when special teams bit us in the butt and a couple other mistakes too. Offensive line jumping off first play. It was 1st and 20 before Adrian even touched the ball for the first time. So there's a lot of, again, that close, right? But got to do that many more things better to get over that. So it's interesting. One of the things I find interesting on Twitter is people one way or the other that get so upset, especially with the prognostications. Like, oh my God, you said 6-6, and I think it's going to be higher than that. Oh my gosh. Or, hey, I think we're going to go 10-2. And then you get the reverberation from the other people. It's like, what do people care what other people think anyways? Like, I mean, Rob's on the background here. He says 15-0, and whether he believes it or not isn't even important. If he believes it, then he believes it. It's like, let him. And the games are going to be played one way or the other. So that's the prove it. At the end of the day, the games are going to be played, and we're all going to see where it ends up. I'm optimistic that we're going to see a significant increase in wins, but a significant increase. If someone said, hey, will you double your wins? I think a lot of people would say that's significant. Double your wins, and look where we're at. We're right at that 6 that you talked about, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say from an excitement standpoint, there's something in me that I've maybe it just happens every offseason, and I'm just noticing it more this year, but it feels like it's football season. I'm ready. I'm pumped. Last year when we went to Illinois and Champaign, it was a weird day. It was the first year coming off of COVID and everything. And I don't know. Things feel normal again. Like this feels like it's going to be a normal start of the season, even though we're in Ireland. And I don't know. I'm optimistic and hopeful that all those changes are going to actually get us back there. So
I hope. And that's the thing is, that's all at the end of the day, that's all we have control over is, we can hope and support. And if it doesn't work, then okay. Then we figure out what went wrong and try to make sure it doesn't happen that way again next time. And, just dive face first back in the pool and keep going.
That's what Redcast Dave, he said that on the very first episode we ever did 5 years ago. We started in spring of 2017. So we've had a glorious 5 years run. But the one thing he said about Husker fans, and this is what makes us blue bloods in his opinion, is that, if it doesn't work, we're not going to give up. We'll never let this thing die off. That's kind of what happened with, like, say, Minnesota football in the early 60s. For a number of reasons. The Vikings came in there. That didn't help them either. But in Nebraska's case, there's so much passion that, you know what? If it doesn't work with Frost, then it doesn't work with Frost, and you move on to the next one. And if it doesn't work with that person, you move on. And eventually, 10, 12 coaches later, back in 1962, we ran into Devaney, who wasn't even our first option. We didn't want him. We wanted another coach first. And Devaney was our second choice. And sometimes you just dumb luck, you're back your way into it. But the passion of the fans, they want to get this thing back. And when we say back, I mean, you mentioned it earlier too. And I think this is a really important distinction for really only Nebraska's held to these kind of standards maybe Alabama. But when people go, well, are you really, do you think you're going to go 60-3 over 5 years, like you did back in your college days? Well, no, but no one does that. I mean, I'm not holding Nebraska to that standard. I'm holding us to a standard of being a consistent player in the national scene, being a consistent winner, tough-nosed team, hard to beat, 9 wins a season kind of thing. That, to me, when I say the standard, that is the standard that I hold us to. And if you're doing that over time, there's going to be a couple of those years where you excel above that. You get to that 11-1, kind of season, and you might have heaven forbid, we might have an 8-4 or 8-5 season, once we get back to that point too. That might happen too. Not everyone gets to be Osborne and go 255, 49-3 in 25 years, which is just ridiculous. The guy averaged more than 10 wins and less than 2 losses. Insane. Absolutely insane. But no, it's I think we're on the same page.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is I would love for it to be 95 again. But I would be perfectly happy with 1988. That was a pretty good year too. Yeah. And the competitiveness, it's not just about the wins. The last time we went 9-4, I don't want, to be quite honest, I don't really want 2016 again. It's not about the record. Dave and I flew out to Columbus, Ohio to watch us lose 62-3. We watched Iowa, do what they did to us and have Banker talk about, the bloodbaths that they must have in practice. Again, this always comes back to it's that language thing. It's, are we close or not? I've heard people say, I'm tired of us getting our butts beat by Iowa. I'm tired of losing to Iowa. We're not getting our butts beat. Getting our butts beat is what happened in 2016-17. We've lost by 19 points in 4 years. We need to stop making the mistakes. We got to stop getting our punts blocked. We got to stop having kickoff returns like 3 years ago. We got to stop dropping punts like Cam Taylor-Britt did 2 years ago. Those are mistakes that need to be fixed. But that's different than just getting your butt kicked and pushed all around the field too. So there's some I'm telling you, it's strange times. I see progress in areas, but at the end of the day, wins are the thing that are going to matter now. Prove it. Mm-hmm.
And
I was thinking the other day, I've seen the goalposts come down in 7 of the 8 Big 8 cities. But I can't remember the last time the goalpost came down in Lincoln. And I would love to see that again sometime. This year would be great if they could do it. So, say in September, that would be great.
Against North Dakota. I don't care. Just bring them down. If we beat Northwestern and then we go to 2-0 beating North Dakota, bring them down.
I would say let's wait for Georgia Southern. Let's wait for 3-0 to get that first 3-game winning streak. Then we can tear them down and party down O Street.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We've gone just over an hour here. That's a typical fan forum there. We're going to do some parting shots. And as typical, our tradition is we always let the guest have the final parting shot. I usually wouldn't have one on this, but I am going to have one today. And this is because we had news today. Jack Pierce, former Husker assistant coach with Osborne. He was a off-field recruiting coordinator. Amazing dude. We posted a video of him on YouTube today. It was Osborne's last Sports Nightly that he did back in 2012 before he left the AD spot. And Jack Pierce comes out there, and I mean, just old school, storytelling, funny guy. And he passed away. So this tweet from the Huskers account today: our heart goes out to the family, friends, Husker colleagues of Jack Pierce, who passed away earlier this morning. Jack served on Coach Osborne's staff for 12 plus years as an assistant coach, helping build many of the legendary teams that took the field for the Big Red. So the Redcast certainly gives our condolences to the Pierce family. Dave, send us out of here.
All right. Well, yeah. Obviously, if you want to follow, great. If you want to click and read the stuff I write, well, let's definitely do that. Not afraid to admit I get paid per click. I try not to use clickbait, but by all means, if you like something you read, share it. Or if you don't like it, tell me. I'll answer to it. But otherwise, let's just have fun. Let's talk nice to each other. At the end of the day, we're all real fans. Because if you're not, you're not going to talk about Nebraska football if you're not a real fan. So be nice to each other and let's have a lot of fun and remember what it's all about.
It's great. We can find you at Feit Can Write on Twitter, facebook.com/Feit Can Write as well, huskermax.com, obviously. Is there any other place to find your work, or does that kind of cover it all?
The Twitter, my Twitter bio has the link to my articles on Husker Max. So, if you want to start your day by just clicking about 15 of them, that's how I usually start my day.
And click refresh a lot too, right? Does that help too?
That makes me a solid nickel, which is super great.
Well,
hoping to pay off my season tickets with my writing that's always the goal.
Well, there you go. In the days of inflation, every nickel counts. So, well, thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate you joining us. And Redcasters, you too could be the next one to join us on the forum.